Hello, everybody. I'm just going to wait just a few minutes to make sure that everyone is on for the webinar this morning. Welcome. We are really honored and pleased that you're joining here with us today to have a discussion on communicating during the new normal. And so we'll just wait just a minute or so as everyone enters the lobby and gets their front row seats to the webinar. All right, I think we've got a quorum and I will go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to our webinar, Onward Arlington, Communicating the New Normal. We're really pleased that you can join us today. This is a topic that I know many of you are aware of, concerned of. We did a webinar yesterday where we worked with our regulators to talk through the new policy as Arlington County has reopened, as does the rest of the state, into phase 1. So we now kind of have a clear understanding of what the policies, what the regulations are, and now we're going to jump into a topic where how do we communicate this new normal to our clients, to our customers, to people, to our staff, to people that are outwardly facing to our business community. One thing that I see there's a question about recording. We will be recording this session today. It will live on into prosperity and will be there for you to use, or if you'd like to share with other members of your team, feel free. We'll also be sending out survey and materials. We want the webinar also to be very interactive. So if you have questions as we're going along, feel free to ask those questions in the chat box. Presentation will be about 25 to 30 minutes, and the Q&A, we really want that to come strong. That'll be at the end. And today's webinar is sponsored by BizLaunch, our friends at the Maestro Group, and our very new best friend from Factor3 Digital, Carla, who will be our presenter today. You see her right over to, I guess that's my left. And Carla, we're so glad that you can join us to talk today on this very important topic. I know you're the Chief Content Officer at Factor3 Digital, and you've had some amazing background in working with Pew Charitable Trusts and just doing some very innovative things in the digital space. And so we're so grateful that our friends at the Maestro Group have come to introduce us to you and the amazing work that you're doing. And so I'm not going to take too much time, but I will be handing over the webinar to you, and I'll go in the background, but we'll be listening as well with bated breath. And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us today.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that glowing introduction. All right, you guys, so we'll get started. Just a little bit about me and Factor3 and the other folks that are going to be helping out in this webinar. So I'm Carla. I'm one of the founders of Factor3 Digital. We're basically like a small digital firm here in Arlington. So we design, write, code, and film all the stuff that helps nonprofits and businesses connect with their audiences online. And we're here because we're a small business just like you. Helping people learn how to communicate better and effectively on digital is our thing. And frankly, what better time for us to do that than with the pandemic, which has essentially forced so many of our customers to stay home and really engage almost exclusively on digital online, right? I think even my mom knows how to Zoom these days. She might be watching. So that's why we're here. Before we get started, I also have Mike Villad here. He's from Maestro. He's running the presentation behind the scenes. He's also going to help field some questions, which we'll mostly take at the end. He's got a ton of experience in retail and sales, and he's been a great asset and kind of helping us think through this presentation. So if you have questions, just use the chat feature. And we'll address those later. All right, so let's get started. All right, so why are we going to have this workshop today? So there were two things that occurred to me as I was thinking about this presentation. The first thing is a few weeks ago, you might have seen this because it was a viral story. There was a story about a small ice cream shop, I think in Massachusetts, that was essentially mobbed by these angry customers on the first day of opening. And things got pretty bad. The owner decided even, I think at some point, to shut his shop down for good. And not a great scenario, but it made me really think about, wow, you know, hindsight is 2020. How did this happen? What things could that very well-intentioned business owner have done to prevent this from happening, which means other business owners as well. And that's kind of one of the reasons why we're here today. None of us wants to be that ice cream shop. And you can see in the kind of on the screen there, some excerpts from the article and you know, what the customers' attitudes were and what their actions were and the unfortunate consequences for the ice cream shop owner. The other thing is it's a recent article posted by McKinsey Research, and I'm going to spare you the details, but basically what they posit is that every single business in America today needs a digital strategy to survive essentially post-pandemic. In my line of work, we do a lot of work with like think tanks and some large companies, and they know what digital strategy means. So we don't have to explain that to them. But it occurred to me that if you're a small business owner, your concept of digital might just be, I've got a Facebook page, and occasionally I'm going to update my cover image or put in a new product shot, and that's my digital strategy. Or I'll send like some emails to my customers. Some of you might have more organic and more sophisticated approaches, but I thought, let's put these two things together. Let's put the question of how can I have a successful reopening with my customers, and how can I use digital and social media to essentially give me the best advantage, right? To really help me have a good sort of first day, if you will. And that is the goal of this presentation. All right, so let's go back to the store for just a second and take a look at what happened. So the owner didn't really do it. He didn't do anything wrong. As a matter of fact, he followed his state, if you read the article, he followed his state's guidelines to the T for reopening, and then he opened the store. But nonetheless, what happened was this: a ton of the customers either didn't know or they ignored the store's request to do a key thing, which was order online and order ahead of time. They were trying to do this to limit traffic. So the customers just showed up the way they used to before COVID-19, right? And the problem was the owner wasn't staffed for that kind of crowd. The customers faced long waits, which they didn't before. They got frustrated, they were rude. Some of the store employees were harassed. One later quit. And you know, the story went viral, the public stepped in, the owner started to actually change his communications approach, and the store stayed open. It was fine. So it's a happy ending, but it's like a cautionary tale to be avoided. And you don't need to be an ice cream store owner, I think, to learn some of these lessons, right? And that's, again, kind of what we're going to go through. So here's like, there's a couple of key things here. Number one, the customers ignored or never received the owner's post. He had one post on social media explaining his new ordering policy, okay? They went to the store pretty much expecting things to be the way that they were pre-pandemic. And then they got really angry and frustrated when their expectations weren't met. So that's what happened. All right, so that brings us to the three reasons why we're presenting today. Number one, customers are making up their minds whether or not to visit you right now. Like if you've closed your shop or you're limiting what you're doing, or if your doors are closed completely, it doesn't matter. Your customers are on digital, whether or not you are, right? They're making up their minds on social media. So like that McKinsey article talked about, you need a strategy to engage them effectively on digital, right? So the key is effectively. Number two, the customers have expectations about how their visit's going to go to you, right? Their first visit back. And that's probably based on how things were before the pandemic. They're not mind readers, right? All they have is kind of what's in their head. So that means you need to plan for how to preserve that good customer experience that you had before COVID-19, even though you're doing things differently now. So that is key. And then the third thing, the last thing, is if you preserve that good customer experience, you're going to keep their trust. And if you don't, they'll be taken by surprise by the things that maybe disappoint them or anger them. Trust is broken, maybe they don't come back. And there goes your reputation. And then the worst part is digital, right? All right, so the I think the most important thing that you need to sort of keep track of is that when you're on digital, there's a lot of different places that you kind of need to be, right? How well you communicate online will help people basically decide whether to feel safe returning back to your store because they're carrying all these emotions with you. So again, I just want to repeat this. Maybe before, your interactions on like Facebook or Instagram or whatever, maybe they were lighthearted, maybe they were sporadic, but right now there's a lot of weight on the things that you communicate on those platforms, right? And the customers are going to be looking to you for some guidance there on whether they should come to you or not. And you need to make sure that the things you put out are thorough and they're well thought out. And we'll help you think through that stuff. Let's take a look at a recent example, actually. That'll help put this together for you. All right, so here is something that I screen grabbed from a recent, it's a Facebook group. What happened is a customer went to a local store, I think here in Arlington, maybe Falls Church, I don't remember, but they went to a store and they went for takeout. And they noticed that customers were not, a group of 20-something customers were not wearing masks. And they didn't know what the mask policy was, and they weren't even comfortable asking the employees to do something. So basically that customer felt unsafe. So they came back, they left the store, and they posted on Facebook. So it's a nice customer. They're not angry. They're not trolling. They're not trying to bring the business down in this post. They literally just felt unsafe. And so they shared their concerns, and they were asking for advice on Facebook. They did decide not to order in person anymore. And remember, all of this is happening on Facebook. So the other customers that are there heard about that store, the name of the store, heard about the experience, and that negative experience now moves over to other people that could be potential customers. And as you can see from the things that I highlighted kind of in red, some even shared their experience, like, oh, I heard things weren't very good there, right? So that affects your brand within the community. So that's what you want to avoid, and a lot of these things are avoidable. So let's talk about the second thing, which is what happens when customers do decide to visit you post-lockdown. Okay, so let's say your social media is good and the comments are good, the review's great, and then they're like, okay, I trust you, I'm gonna come back. All right, so back to expectations. When they return, they're gonna have all these expectations, and if those are different than what you're actually gonna be providing, you could be in trouble, right? Because the two things don't align. So going back to the ice cream shop, the customers expected to get their ice cream the way they did before COVID-19, line up and buy. But the owner had less staff, he had social distancing requirements, he had a new ordering process, and a whole bunch of other changes. That message did not get through to the customers. He had one post, and that was it, and chaos ensued. So the key to avoiding that scenario, and really the purpose of this workshop, is communicating proactively with your customers early about what to expect, and as important, how they can help you have a successful reopening, right? They have to kind of be your partners. So everybody has hindsight. I know it's always 2020 and there's a ton of stuff the owner could have done ahead of time, but how was he supposed to know? So again, that's the goal. I want you to know. I want you to think about these things early. And again, the key is think through and communicate as much as you can and be as repetitive as you can be so that you and your employees basically can have, and your customers can have all these successful firsts, right? It could be a first day, the first week, the first month, the first quarter of your reopening. That's the experience that I want you to have. So that takes us to the third point. Mike, yeah, there we go. So the third point is obviously trust, right? The only reason we're doing all of this, you want to stay in business, and the only way you're going to stay in business is if you're able to preserve the trust of your customers. You don't want to be like that unfortunate establishment that probably inadvertently made that person who was sharing on Facebook feel unsafe, right? Or those ice cream store people go crazy. So it's just worth repeating. How is it that you break trust? By giving people unpleasant surprises that cause them confusion or disappointment or even anger. So that's kind of the third goal. All right, so let's go to the next section. There's 5 ways to get to a successful day one. All right, let's go over these very quickly, and then I'll go more in depth. So one, what was the customer's experience like when they visited your store pre-pandemic? You have to take some time to think about that, right? Number two, the changes that you're going to be making. Number three, how is the stress of COVID-19? This one's important. Going to change how your customers behave, because that's the attitude that they're going to be bringing to your store when they walk back in for the first time. So you have to be prepared for that. And then how will the customers feel about all the new changes that you've made, especially because they have a new mindset. And then if you put all those things together, that's essentially number five, right? Which is like, okay, I know all these things. How do I communicate and solve for all of this? Because you don't want to be the ice cream shop. So it could be like, where were your customers hanging out and expecting to hear from you before, like Facebook or email? How do you explain all those new changes and limitations, but in a positive way, even as you're struggling to understand what they are, right? That's important because we're getting a lot of guidance and regulations and things like that. And then when? Like, when do you communicate all these things so that people kind of know ahead of time? So you put all those five things together, and basically that is your new customer experience. And your new customer experience, right, is essentially what's going to make or break you. So I kind of rushed through those five concepts. Let's just go through those and walk through them a little bit more slowly. So the first one, the pre-pandemic customer experience. How do you do this? How do you get in their heads effectively so that you understand where they're coming from? Because the whole point in running your new business and opening is you want to meet your customers where they are. So you have to understand where they were first, right? So this is a really good time to just take a step back and think about it doesn't matter what kind of business you have, right? What were things like in your store? Like, and don't forget about things like the vibe. Was it relaxed? Were there like kids running around? The customers come and they hugged you or they chatted. You did things a certain way. They ran into their neighbors. They hung out in the coffee area. They picked up a magazine. It's as much as the experience as it is anything else, right? But when you reopen, they might be in for a change. So now that you understand where your customers kind of left off with you, you can use those previous experiences and kind of identify all the things that are going to be different for when they return. So this is, the previous section was your customers. Now this is all about you. You're going to be changing things up. So I think of this as the fork in the road. So we go back to the ice cream store, right? This is where you can make a difference and choose the other road, right? This is the part where you're going to create a different customer experience, and they don't know that because you're making all these changes. They're going to expect the same thing. Maybe they'll be like, oh, I guess I'll have to wear a mask. Do I have to wear a mask? Are the hours the same? And that's it. They're not going to give it much thought, right? They'll have internal expectations, but they're not going to give it a lot of thought, right? Explicit thought. So from masks to the new atmosphere, maybe there's a new restroom policy, right? Shorter hours, waits, maybe your product selection is different or your menu items have changed, whatever it is, it's different. Write down the things that you are going to be changing, even if you don't think that they're important. You're going to use this later. Okay, so let's get back inside the customer's head for just a second. All right, so now the new customer sort of pandemic mindset. This one's really important because you're not the only one that's different these days, right? Your customers are so different. So as evidenced by like recent headlines in other states, even here, unfortunately in Virginia, maybe, customers that are returning to stores, they're different. They might be quicker to get angry or confrontational, impatient, frustrated, afraid even. And I guess what I'm saying in this part is that like this is normal. The pandemic has been really devastating for so many of us, right? Even if we didn't get sick, we've all experienced fear or uncertainty, maybe even grief and anxiety on a daily basis. It's reasonable that our customers are going to be carrying that trauma of those emotions with them as they anxiously return to what they hope is the new normal, right? And you need to be prepared for that. And that's kind of an emotional thing, but you do, because guess what? You are their return to normal. No pressure, but it may not be fair, but that's what you're going to be faced with. So the best thing to do is just keep that in mind as you're talking to your employees about what to expect and yourself, and as you sort of engage with your customers. But the thing you want to avoid is don't fall into the trap of just. right? I just need to post my new hours to Facebook. I just need to hang my shingle. I just need to hope for the best. That's the worst thing that you can do right now. Don't do the just. Okay, so if that seems a little bit overwhelming, it's not, it's common sense. So we're gonna talk through how to take all those questions and answers and actually put that into a plan that lets you figure out how to communicate. So first, you want to determine how your new normal, all your changes will actually affect your customers. And that's gonna let you determine what you need to worry about communicating, because you don't wanna communicate 18 million things. If there's some things that you're doing that your customers, it's not gonna affect them, don't bother. But how do you decide what to prioritize? So the way I'm thinking about this is like, at least in the beginning, focus on the negative stuff that might or will cause them to be angry or confused or disappointed, or in the case of that previous Facebook example, even feel unsafe. Those are really critical things. The county is asking you, they're issuing guidelines, and I'm sure you're going through those right now, like, wait, do I do this or do I do that? Or what does this mean? Let me read this one more time. So there's a lot going on in your head. So when you've gotten to a place where you understand that, put yourself back into the customer mindset and say, okay, when I do these things that I know I need to do that are different, how is it going to make them feel? What is it going to make them do? And if the answer is neutral, it'll be fine, great. If it's positive, maybe that's something you want to promote. Consider that sort of nice to have and optional. But if it's negative, if it's a negative change, then you absolutely must communicate that proactively. So basically, you need to identify those pain points for the customer that are the result of changes you're going to be making, whether you have to make them or you want to make them. And those are the things you focus on first. So essentially, they're going to find out the changes either way, right? They're going to come, they're going to visit you, they're going to be unhappy when they find out, or they're going to be pleased because you communicated with them in advance and they know what to expect. All right, so now this is sort of like planning time. This is the plan. All right, you've done all these things. You walked in the customer's shoes. You got inside their head to understand their emotions and attitude. You figured out which things you're going to be changing up on them. And you've even thought through now how are they going to be affected by those changes, especially the pain points. So you're all set. So now you have to execute, right? You're gonna communicate. So take your priority list, figure out which platforms are best for communicating it. I could probably spend hours talking about the merits of Facebook versus Instagram versus Twitter versus email versus a waitlist app. I'm not going to do that. This isn't really the time for that. As a shortcut, I'm just going to say go where your customers were already engaging with you and communicate more and communicate as soon as you can. Now is not the time for you to debate whether you need to launch a fancy new Instagram, whether you need a marketing plan, whether you need all these things. That can come in time, but you know, the county just issued regulations. We're getting, you know, like Northern Virginia is going into phase 1 now. We're getting ready. This isn't the time for you to reinvent the wheel. This is the time to make the wheel that you've got, the ship, better. So use the tools you are already using to communicate with your customers and just do a bang up job of sending all that priority information to your customers and kind of thinking it through. The big moral of the story is please don't assume that one post you put up about your hours or your ordering policy will be seen by anyone. Do not assume that. Repeat those important messages over and over again. Ask your followers to share them. Send them over multiple platforms and tools, not just your social media, also your email, SMS, or apps if you use them, and do all of it early. Repetition is key because, as you know, on social, you can't assume that people are going to tune in exactly when you put something on. And obviously, I'm talking about your website as well. That goes without saying. All right, so that was sort of the telling portion. But remember that on social media, you're never responding or talking to just one customer, right? As previous examples have shown, you're responding to their entire network and you're responding to the public, or for better, for worse, they're responding on your behalf. So you're not just telling them things, right? That previous slide was about telling. You're also going to be monitoring social media to engage with your customers in a positive way. You want to offer solutions to their problems. You don't want to come off as defensive, right? So a lot of this is you have to be very proactive. You have to be responsive. You have to have a good attitude about it, because this is different, right? People are almost exclusively on digital these days, and they're getting so much information from there. You can't rely on that in-store experience the way you used to before, or even those like referrals. People might have forgotten about you. So you really need to kind of engage with your customers on digital and have a good vibe about it. I guess even if some of the things are difficult, if you're getting complaints, maybe you offer some solutions as well. The other thing you should be doing, especially for those of you that are maybe relatively new to it or aren't accustomed to using it as much, copy. So take a look at how your competitors and your peers are communicating with the customers, and emulate the good stuff and stay away from the bad stuff. So you're not just looking at what kind of graphic did this other restaurant owner post. You're actually looking at what kind of messages is this business putting out, and how are customers responding? How are they sharing? And the reason I think you need to do that is because you're making the customers a part of your journey to reopening. It sounds weird, but it's not just about you. You are trying so hard to create a good experience for them, and you don't want that to just fall flat. You have to ask them to create a good experience for you. And how do they do that? Well, we see it all the time. They get excited about you. They post about your business. Hey, this is a great business. They really need help in reopening. Everybody order stuff or visit them or whatever. They're sharing and they're spreading the word. So hopefully all these things, if you do these things right, you monitor your social, you respond promptly, you're not defensive, you're solution oriented, and you're really kind of responsive in general, and you're looking at all the good stuff that other people are doing and benefiting from maybe their missteps so you don't repeat them. All of that should add up to a good reopening. And the other part, and I don't mean to be too negative, but if we have to do this again, if we all have to shut down and reopen and shut down and reopen, I hope we don't. But the nice thing is you will then have like a good model for turning the lights back on. And you'll essentially, if you didn't have a great or strong or consistent following before, you'll have trained your customers to sort of be steadily following you, right? So instead of checking in every now and then whenever you like post an image or this or that, they'll become accustomed to more of an ongoing conversation with you. And it doesn't have, you don't need to spend, 3 hours a day putting up product photos on 15 different platforms. Again, we're talking about using what you had before, but just using it to communicate this really important stuff, using it in a very consistent way now, right? And thinking through what you're doing so that it kind of goes beyond the promotional stuff. All right, so that's about it. So we can open things up to questions. I did want to mention quickly that we developed a toolkit that goes into this in way more detail. So shameless plug for something that we developed. I kind of ran through a lot of different scenarios quickly, and I hinted at stuff, but we thought about kind of eight scenarios that you should think through about things that might be changing in your business that may not be obvious to you. Like maybe you had a lot of families and kids, right? Young kids before, and now your restroom is only like one person at a time, or whatever. There's a lot of different scenarios that can apply to different businesses. So how do you think through that to make sure you haven't forgotten anything? And how do you easily share those things on social media? So you can check out the toolkit. Mike, if you'll go to the next slide, you'll see our toolkit, where you can order it. And there's a little code for the folks that tuned in that you can use to get a little bit of a discount. All right, let me stop talking and I guess walk us through some questions.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Carla. We really appreciate the presentation. We did have a few questions that came in through the chat and the question box. Sarish asked a really good one. and I can kind of answer this, but if you have any additional thoughts around this, Carla, as well, please chime in. But any sign or posting required at the front, are there any signage or posting requirements for the front door of businesses to comply with the county policy and regulations? So I'll tee that up a little bit. So yes, actually for restaurants and different businesses, there are signage requirements that businesses need to post on their establishment, explaining different policies. For restaurants, it goes in a little bit more. There's different tables that you cannot, that you have to have reserved to maintain social distancing and these sorts of things. The beauty of it is that the Virginia Department of Health has actually developed little templates that businesses can download and use and just quickly print. But if you have any other thoughts on messaging from a sign standpoint, Carla, from a strategy, please feel free to chime in.
Yeah, it's funny. I was biking the other day, and I think I was biking past the Petco store on Wilson Boulevard, like in the Boston Quarter, and they had done a really good job of putting up these enormous signs of like, hey, like the social distancing and whatever, and they were very prominently posted on their window, and I was like, that's awesome, and I was thinking about sharing it right for here. But it occurs to me that for some of these things, by the time they get to your store, that's great that it's there, but this is exactly the kind of thing that you want to communicate. And you can make a social media graphic, you can talk to us and we'll make it for you. But we also have these sort of templates for these kinds of things to communicate, everything from social distancing to hours, etc. So this is both there are like positive ways to share this on social media that make it feel like this is a good thing, not a bad thing, not an onerous thing, not we're limiting you, not a no, not you can't, right? And so how you like literally design that, I think can affect the vibe that you're gonna put out to your customers. And as important, when you're on social, how you explain that. The benefit to your customers uniquely, right? Because if you just say like, Arlington's making me do this, so, here's my sign, that's great, but that's not going to change the mindset of your customers. You want to think through your customers, why they visit your particular business, what they want to get from you, and how you can spin that in a positive way so that you take ownership of this and like, I care about your safety. I'm doing this for you because I care about people that care about animals or whatever. So definitely on social media, do that even before, it's as important as by the time they come to your store, because if things are different, like the ice cream shop owner, I'm sure he had a sign up, but the customers were already there.
Right. Well, and it kind of goes like the Lake of the Ozark, which there was like a big social distancing sign by the pool, and there was nobody. It was like people smoking by the non-smoking sign or something, before. But anyway, so yes, very good point. The other question I have, and it's about this is something that's been on my mind a little bit, and how businesses react to it, and it's from a messaging standpoint. And unfortunately, in this kind of era that we live in, face coverings, this COVID, pandemic has become political, and I think it really depends on where you are in the country. But how can a small business owner who really just wants to open their business and remain nonpartisan, how do you craft in knowing that the COVID situation has become politicized, how do you craft your message to avoid that?
Yeah, it's funny, I've been thinking about this a lot, like for myself as well, right? And my son and my wife, as we go into different establishments, like how safe do we feel? And one of the things we actually cover in the toolkit is moving from a me to a we, which is harder than it sounds. But I think really explaining it's, you wearing a mask makes my employees feel safer. The we in the store feel safer. So totally understand that you don't want to wear a mask or feel that you need to, or you think your health is fine, and that's great, and that's perfect for you. We don't have a choice about whether to be here or not. This person behind me at the counter needs to show up every day for work, and her health or his health could be affected, and the families that they take care of, right, by sort of that choice that you're making. So I think again, this is a very, this is where the owners can leverage their existing relationship with their customers, milk it for all it's worth. And this is actually where social media can help. I was looking at that business owner, that ice cream shop guy. He went back to Facebook and he asked his customers for help. There have been numerous businesses that have been posting and saying, can you guys please help spread the word that we're doing this other thing differently? I've seen patrons of shops and stores posting on behalf of those same businesses saying, hey, can you spread the word about this? Or, you know, these guys are now handing out masks at the front door. In our toolkit, we cover like fun things that you can do. So you're not just like laying the hammer down on people. Like, you know, you can take like, I think one of the things we put in there, we had a bunch of ideas for masks, but one of them was like, which I stole from some state, do a mask selfie, favorite mask of the week, you know,
that's fun.
or whatever, just for bringing in a mask. You know, there's engaging ways. And if you talk about this on social media, it gets you traction on social media, and it kind of injects a little bit more, not levity, but it just sort of takes it out of the realm of, you know, I'm forcing you to do this. But at the end of the day, your customers have to feel safe.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
So the next question is, in terms of trust with their customers, what happens if there happens to be a case of COVID at our business? How do we rebuild that trust with their customers or create a positive experience for them? And, you know, unfortunately, you know, this is something I think a lot of people have, some businesses have dealt with already, but from a messaging standpoint and strategy standpoint, what advice do you have, Carla?
So first I'll put on my legal disclaimer hat. You know, there's HIPAA laws, right? And so one of the things I think that businesses are struggling with is, wow, if I have an employee, like, am I going to get in trouble if I tell people that there's an employee that, you know, that tested positive for COVID? So the first thing you should do is definitely make sure that, and I don't know the answer to that, but make sure that you are compliant with whatever the medical and legal privacy laws are around an employee's condition. And don't forget, there's rumors too. I heard that this store had 2 positive, right? So from a messaging perspective, what you don't want to do is let those things spiral out of control and have you lose control of the conversation when it goes on, guess what? Facebook, which is where, you know, numerous examples of where this can happen. So I think the first thing that you can do is find out what you can disclose and what you're comfortable disclosing. The more transparent that you can be without running afoul, without not being compliant, right? Within the law, the more transparent you can be with your customers. We had a situation at my kid's school. I think it was like the last day of school where there was this wild rumor that some kid was sick and all the kids were running around, he's got COVID, right? Like, you know, 3rd, 4th, 5th graders going to do. And so I experienced that firsthand as a parent. And so having the school jumped in, they sent a message or like, we heard this happened. These are the steps we're taking. This is what we know. This is what we can't tell you, even though we know. And this is what you should do. I think for a business, just acknowledging the situation, first and foremost, and saying whatever you're comfortable saying about that, reassuring people about the safety, is really important. One of the things that we put in the toolkit is there's like examples of like business owners when they're reopening, they take videos of their hygiene practices. Like, this is my new washing station, this is my just an iPhone video. They're not paying a video producer to do anything. But so I'm sort of answering your question a little bit indirectly at this point, but having the customers kind of like experience the safety and the cleanliness things that you are working so hard to set up before they set foot in your store is going to put them in a particular mindset. So if somebody does test positive, once you've figured out how to handle it, and you should handle it, you should not just like ignore it, pretend it's not there and hope it goes away. So figure out what the legal obligations are and figure out what you can do beyond that and address that directly. Facebook may not be the place to do it. It could be your website, you know, right? But I think definitely, yeah, and doing the mindset with the customers beforehand, I think will help them become your allies. Oh, I feel safe. Well, it happens to everybody, but look how she communicated with us. You want that.
That's good advice. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And then another question was around businesses that provide services in a client's home. So have you thought about businesses where the service is delivered in a customer/client home versus the customer coming to your physical store? So this is, I assume, kind of situations like, comes to mind like the Comcast repairman providing, service in a home. Like how can those industries best communicate their new normal?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the same thing. It's a different experience because the business is coming to you, right? But it requires two people or two parties, right? There are things you need the customer to do to prepare for that visit. Like, we get things delivered to us, and some of the companies that deliver are very explicit about what we need to do. Please don't open your door. Please stay 6 feet away. Please keep pets away. Please do this, right? So I think principles of it's a two-way street, and I think both need to put themselves in the shoes of the other. And what do I need to do to make you feel safe? What are you telling me that I need to do to make you feel safe, and vice versa? It might change the dynamic from a regulatory perspective or the guidance, right? But it doesn't change the dynamic of kind of being open and thinking about things from the perspective of the other person and preparing for that in advance. And so
No, I
communicate.
think that's a good, yeah. And understanding the two-way street. Now that's really good as well. The next question is, what is the best way to get feedback from each guest that visited our restaurant? And do you think it's too much to ask from each guest?
No, I mean, think about yourself as a customer, right? When you go visit an establishment, first of all, it's flattery. Oh, you care what I think? I just came to get a meal and you're asking me, right? So
Right.
never underestimate the power of the ego of your customers. And then they want to share what they know, right? They're experts. I'm an expert about your restaurant because that's my food right there. Of course they'll share. I think, I've seen people develop even little business cards, with a particular hashtag, drop me a line, tag me on Facebook. The shameless self-promotion of if you had a good experience, you get it when you buy something on Amazon, right? Please rate my product, my experience. They're used to it. And I think because they have that relationship with you, it's much more personal than Amazon. Exploit it to its fullest. If they don't want to do it, they won't, but they're going to be flattered and you can learn. So one of the things we talk to our clients about all the time is message research, message testing. This is, even if it's not on Facebook, if you just, hey, how did your visit go? How safe did you feel? Can you fill out this little comment card? Can you drop me a line here? Can you text? Whatever you feel comfortable doing, ask your customers. And then the most important thing is share. If you had a good experience, please, do you mind tagging my restaurant and letting people know, or take a picture or do something cool, because they're going to want to do it, and that's free advertising for you, and it's positive reinforcement for you because you care about your customers so much. So I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, and I always thought, it's asking for a good I mean, if something, your customer has a bad experience at a business, they're definitely going to share that usually. But if they have a good experience, they're less likely to do that than before the campaign or before the pandemic. So having that message out there, asking them to do that, I think is priceless. So.
And explain, right? To you, it might be obvious that you're reopening for the first time and you're now struggling. And I think not to get a little hokey about it, but just we're vulnerable, right? We need each other's help. And asking your customers to help you, there's nothing wrong with that. They're going to love you for it even more. It humanizes you, I think. And we're all in this situation together. You've seen how we're all trying so hard to help one another. People, they don't have enough opportunities to help, right? And they took the time to come visit you, so they'll be happy to take the time to share some positive feedback. And if it's negative, right, if it's constructive criticism, I think a measure of a business is not how they handle praise, how they handle challenges. So take that as an opportunity, and you're going to build a very loyal customer.
Yeah, and then kind of a follow-up to the same point is, the question is, do you think it's too much to call them in person to take this feedback? I guess it just kind of depends on your format, but
It does. I mean, it's all about you got to meet the customer where they are. So if you give them like a comment card, or if you direct them to an area on your site where there's a comment field and they put in their phone number and you go, can we contact you? I personally think that that personal interaction, people are, it depends on the age of the customer as well. Like I have a feeling if you go somebody that skews on the younger side, they're gonna be like, why are you calling me? Send me a text, like, can you email me? Like, don't call me. So I read the situation. But always asking customers how they prefer to be, how can I follow up with you? What's your preferred method of me following up with you? Text, email, call, whatever, and then kind of take their lead.
oh, thank you. Well, I think that's all the questions that we had. Carla, I just want to, give you a huge thank you on behalf of BizLaunch and Arlington Economic Development. This was such a wonderful presentation, and you really had great advice for these businesses who are, as we are in phase one, are thinking about what their new normal looks like for them. So I really thank you for joining us. Thank you to Mike from the Maestro Group for driving the presentation and bringing us all together. We really appreciate this. And on behalf of BizLaunch, we don't go away. We are here for you. We were here for you before the pandemic. We're here for you during, and as we reopen, we're here for you. So we are still offering advice, feedback, virtual consultations. We're still going to be doing these webinars and bringing thought leaderships together and subject matter experts. So bizlaunch.org is a great place to go if you're needing resources. Many people had asked about these sign templates. I'm happy to share those with you. We have a restaurant guide and a toolkit that was developed by the police that has all the regulations spelled out for you and helpful context. We will send that to you as well. So we really thank you for joining us today, and thank you to our wonderful speakers.
Thank you so much, Carla. That information was amazing. It was great.
Thank you so much. And you guys have the presentation and the recordings. My email's down there. So any of you, if you have questions, just shoot me an email, and I'm happy to help everybody sort of think through this.
Thank you. Priceless.
Thank you so much.
Community coming together.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, you guys.
Have a good week.
You too.